Whenever you create a program, you need to make sure that it's actually solving your problem correctly, i.e. the answers that you're getting are in fact the answers you should be getting. So to make sure we all know how to do that, today we are going to be talking about some really basic testing techniques and some initial test cases that we'll make. So the problem that we are going to be working on as we learn how to test is a problem related to calculating your age. So we want to know how old you are in months. The user is going to give you their age in whole years. So if you're currently 18, that would be 18, and the number of additional whole months since your last birthday. So if it's September right now and your birthday was in August, then we'll say that there's one additional month in your age in addition to that being 18. So to be able to solve our problem, we need to make sure we understand it, and then we need to make sure we understand the calculation. So if I want to know how many months old I am, then that's the number of years times the number of months in a year, and there are 12 months in a year, and then I just need to add on any additional whole months since my last birthday. So if I'm 1 year old and it's been 1 month since my birthday, I'm 13 months old. So we want to create a set of test cases that tell us what these answers should be. The format that we are going to be doing test cases in this course is as you see here in an Excel document. So within Excel, we have one test case per row. A test case is a single run of our program where we put in all of the inputs that the program needs, and then we test to see that all the outputs are correct. In our particular problem, we know that we have two inputs, the number of years old you are plus the additional months, and we're going to have one output, which is the total number of months we are in our age. So each test case is going to give us what the correct answer should be given particular inputs. So we need to think about what types of inputs we should test. So in general, you want to think about what are some special cases that might break our equation. Often it's really good to test things with zeros and ones and then with some other values. So our first test case can be testing if it works correctly if we are 0 years old but some positive number of months old. So our input would be 0 years and let's say 3 months, so we're 3 months old. So our total months should be 3 because there are no years. We also could test some particular number of years, but there aren't any extra months. So zero extra months, positive years. So we could say 2 years old is the month of our birthday, so there's no extra months. So then we need to make sure we have our correct calculation. So remember we decided that our calculation was the number of years times the number of months in a year. So if we don't have any extra months, we should be 24 months old if we are 2 years old. Now in addition to zeros, we often want to test the lowest non-zero number that makes sense for our program. Everything we're doing here are whole numbers or integers. So we could test 1 year old with 1 month. So this is our first test where we're actually using our entire equation to get our result. So we have 1 year times 12 months in a year plus our number of extra months, which is 1. So our program should give us 13. And we should probably test some non-1 values in both of our variables. So non-0 and non-1 in both inputs. So we could do, say, 3 years and 11 months. So then we need to figure out what the correct answer would be. So 3 times 12 is 36 plus our additional 11 months, 47. So for our initial types of programs, this is a pretty good set of test cases. So we've tested 0 in all of our inputs, we've tested 1 in all of our inputs, we've tested different combinations of values in our years and months inputs. So this gives us 4 different ways that we can test our program to make sure it's working right. And if our program works correctly in all 4 of these cases, we can feel pretty confident that any values we give it, it will work correctly for. Later on this semester, we will learn how to deal with error cases. So for instance, what would happen if you put in 14 months, which doesn't actually make sense in this program. But since we don't know how to program that particular type of test yet, we're going to ignore those for now. So, how do we test our program? After we've created our test cases, we need to write our code. So, here is our code that we have now written. We state the purpose of our program, and you notice that there are comments above each set of steps, so we know what the code below it is doing. So we output what it does, we have some variables to hold special values, we get our input from the user, so we're getting our years, and we're turning that into an integer or a whole number. We're getting our extra months, and we're turning that into a whole number. We do our calculation, years times number of months in a year, plus our extra months, and then we output that to our user. So all we need to do is run through all of our test cases and see if it works. So we'll hit run. Okay, and we will look at our test cases. So our first test case is 0, then 3, and our output should be 3. So 0 years, 3 months. You are 3 months old. Okay, the first test case worked. So now we go to the second test case. 2 and then 0. So we'll run again. 2 years old, 0 months old, and our answer is 22. Does that match? No, it doesn't. Our output should be 24. So we know that something is wrong in our program. So we need to look at what we're doing to our inputs, and we need to look at our calculation and all of our variables. So if we look through here, our calculation looks like it's probably right, but we have this constant value, this number of months in a year. So if we go look at that, there's our error. We accidentally had a typo. So we put in 11 months in a year, but there are actually 12. Okay, so this is why we test, as we could easily just have a typo. We think we designed everything right, but you never know, things go wrong. So now that we have fixed our code, we want to run again, but we need to start from scratch. So just because we think it should be fixed now for the second test case, we still need to test that first one again and make sure we didn't break anything there. So we have 0 and 3 as our inputs, and our output should be 3. So 0, 3, output is 3. Excellent. Okay, so now we run our second test, 2 and then 0 and then 24. 2, 0, we got 24. Great. All right, so let's do another test. 1 and 1 should give us 13. 1, 1, 13. All right, one more test case. 3, 11 should give us 47. 3 years, 11 months, 47 months old. So all of our test cases had passed. This means we can have really high confidence that when we run this on any set of values, so for instance 22 years old and 6 months, we're getting the correct answer. Okay, so if we go and do the calculation, we should see that if you're 22 years old and it's been 6 months since your last birthday, you are 270 months old. So this is basically how we are going to be setting up our test cases for our programs. So you have one column for the description, you have a column for every single input variable. So if you have 4 different inputs, you'll have 4 input columns, and then you have a column for every single output. In this case, we only had 1, but you could have many, many outputs. Every single row should have values for all of these columns. The more input variables you have, probably the more test cases that you will need. As we move on in the semester, we will also learn other ways to use Excel to make creating these test cases a little bit easier. For now, you can just use a calculator to figure out what the answer should be in your output when math is involved.